Equity Mates!
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast where we help you learn to invest just like the best. We break down the world of investing from beginning to dividends so that you can hopefully make some returns. My name's Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going, bro?
I'm good, Bryce. How are you?
Can't complain. Always good to be sitting and chatting stocks with you. What were your thoughts on my new intro there?
It was just almost like the best. I don't know. I got to work on my replies.
Room to improve. So far, we haven't had any comments come in from listeners about my intro. So bring them in. Anyway, enough about the intro.
We could do a whole episode on the intro.
Ren, we've been on a bit of a hot streak lately with some interviews. We thought we'd continue that trend. They've all come in hard and fast, and this one is a really good insight into the terminology that we talk about when we say save to invest, don't save to save. And the reason for that is because today we had the pleasure of chatting with Chris Reining. Chris is known for his, saving intensely, investing intensely, and being able to retire by the age of 37 purely from, exactly that, saving to invest. So we sat down to talk all things about how he did it, what life is like as a retiree at 37 years old, and how we can get there.
Yeah, I think everyone talks about retiring early, or at least having the option to retire. I think that's for us, just having that optionality, not being forced to rely on a paycheck. And, talking to Chris, I think there's some really practical steps that he talked about that everyone can follow. We may not all be millionaires by 35 like he was, but we can definitely all be on the journey. So this was a good one. I liked it.
Yeah, agreed. Hopefully everyone gets as much out of it as we did. So enjoy. So, Chris, before we kick off into the interview and a bit about your background, we always like to start these things with a bit of a game called Overvalued or Undervalued. We will throw an asset class or an index, whatever it may be, at you, and we would like your opinion on whether or not you think it is overvalued or undervalued. So, ready to get stuck in?
Yeah, let's get started.
So, overvalued or undervalued property?
So I'm based in the U.S., and I think that in the U.S. here, most of the market is probably fairly valued, but there are definitely pockets that seem to be overvalued on the coasts.
Overvalued or undervalued, the S&P 500?
So I'm definitely a long-term investor. And so I think that for any long-term investor, if you can buy a slice of 500 American businesses, that over the long term, those will be worth more in the future. So I always think that those are, a purchase of the S&P 500 is always a good purchase.
So then what about the NASDAQ 100, over or under?
I'd say the same thing. It's kind of akin to the S&P 500, although obviously more tech weighted. So I'd say the same thing. I think that, tech is definitely the future, and, software is eating everything. And so an investment in the NASDAQ 100 is always a good long-term investment, I think. Overvalued
or undervalued Bitcoin?
So I'm one of those people who think that Bitcoin is rat poison, and so I don't play in that space, and I think that you're better off investing your money in something that actually produces something.
I think we might have the title for the episode already. Bitcoin is rat poison.
So then, overvalued or undervalued Facebook?
Facebook is an interesting investment. I don't personally own it, but as we all know, Facebook is extremely, extremely far-reaching with the amount of active users, and is also extremely addictive. And so I think that Facebook is probably a good long-term investment if you can hold through the volatility.
So overvalued or undervalued Vanguard ETFs?
As far as Vanguard ETFs, that's kind of broad. So I'll just pick I'll pick one. The total market fund, and similar to the S&P 500, I think if you're buying that for the long term, then it's always a good investment.
And finally, overvalued or undervalued marijuana stocks?
Again, I think that those are very similar to Bitcoin. I know there's just lots and lots of speculation in those stocks. I don't really play in that space. And so I'll go out on a limb and say that those are, as a whole, overvalued.
Interesting. So it sounds like you've definitely got a long-term approach to investing and steer clear of the more volatile, unknown stocks such as marijuana. So before we get into your investing strategy, Chris, it'd be great just to get a bit of an idea about your background, how you came to be in the position that you are. So I came across you actually when I was in Bali doing some Equimates research and came across one of your articles and thought, hey, I think our listeners would really appreciate getting an understanding into how you came to be essentially retired by the age of 37. So let's go back a few years. You studied at university. So what did you study, and were you investing anything at the time of studying university?
So when I was in university, I wasn't investing, to answer your second question, because I was poor, right? A poor university student. And so, yeah, I wasn't investing at that point. It wasn't until I was 22 that I actually started my career and had some money, some capital to actually start investing. But for your first question, I started out investing, or not investing, I started out with a major in, not surprisingly, finance. But then a couple years into university, I discovered computers. I discovered, this operating system called Linux, which I'd never heard about before, that one of my friends was running on his computer. And I sort of fell down the rabbit hole of technology and just became really enamored with technology. And I ended up switching my major to something called management information systems, which is similar to computer science. And at the beginning of my junior year is when I switched my major to that, away from finance. And I ended up with that degree. And my first job out of college, out of university, was doing a cybersecurity job. And so that was what I was super passionate about at that time, was cybersecurity. And, I was really happy and satisfied with doing that work at that time.
So I think looking back, it would have been a good decision to switch to information systems and focus on cybersecurity. Definitely good industries to be exposed to. While you were at uni though, Chris, we're always interested to know if, what people were doing at that time. Were they trying to start any businesses? Were they entrepreneurial back then? So while you were at college, were you trying to start any businesses?
Yeah, I was always interested in business, which is, why I like investing so much, because they're really one and the same. And so I think even if we go further back than that, like when I was a kid, I was always starting little businesses, on my own. So I had, a lawn mowing business. I had a business where I was growing trees in the backyard and selling the saplings to, neighbors and friends. And I was always just sort of entrepreneurial in that sense, and that I liked starting businesses and just sort of being my own boss, if you will. And so in college, I had one business, which was creating websites, and that is, after I got interested in technology, and at that time, this was 2000 and right around the year 2000. Websites were becoming a bigger thing. Most businesses wanted a website. And so I was helping really just small families, set up, or small family businesses set up their own websites for their business.
I also started a lawn mowing business when I was at school, Chris, so things are looking up for me by the sounds of it. So you finished university and then started in the corporate world. Tell us a bit about that. Where were you working, and how did you sort of find that first initial couple of years out of uni?
So my very first job, like I mentioned, was in cybersecurity, and I absolutely loved it. I could spend 8 hours, behind a computer working on cybersecurity type work, doing some programming, protecting against hackers. And it was just like my dream come true. And, I would even remember coming home after work and then like getting right back to work, like just tinkering on with computers and setting up, my own mail servers and, you name it, like I was interested in doing it. And overall, just a great experience. But I think eventually, it sort of, as it happens for most people, it sort of just turns from something that's really, really fun into a job, right? And so now you have this job that you have to go to and doing this thing that you really don't enjoy doing anymore. And the sort of trap is that you get paid really well to do that thing because you do it really well, and so it becomes super hard to actually like switch careers or take a different path through life.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess then the whole reason we want to chat to you is because you did manage to take a different path in life and remove yourself from the corporate world through a very intense saving and investing strategy that I guess led to you being able to completely retire from work. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to say that I'm retired. It's really, I mean, it's true. Like I'm no longer working for money. I'm living off investments. So to that degree, yeah, I am retired.
So can you tell us the story about how you got to retire by 37, and then we might unpack it somewhat?
Sure. So like I was mentioning, when I became sort of disillusioned with, the whole rat race and showing up to the job at a certain time and wearing a certain uniform and all that sort of thing, I made a decision that, the way out was through investing. And I didn't have, I had always been investing. And so when I was 22, I was saving money and putting it into a retirement account. Not a lot. It was $66 a month into my retirement account for, traditional retirement in your 60s. And so I think that I had, that good habit right from the get-go of saving and investing for the future. But it wasn't until I was in my late 20s where I sort of looked at my life and figured out that, I can't sit here and do this same job for the next 40 years. And I also don't want to go back to school to do something else or to find an entirely different job in a different field that I might enjoy more. I'd rather just save and invest and, put up with, the short-term pain to hopefully someday reach a point where I have enough invested money where I can, live off my investments. And so that was the track that I chose. And, when you're investing, you don't really know how it's going to turn out, right? Because you're really at the whim of the markets. But for me, the markets cooperated and I made some good investment choices. And, that really led to where I am today.
So I love this, Chris, and it gives me hope to hear to hear you talk about it, because I know I have, and I think a lot of people that listen to the podcast have had the thought of, saving a lot and investing a lot while we're young to really be able to have some options as we get older and those investments mature. So you give me hope for being able to get out of the 9-to-5 grind and do my own thing. So I think, given we got you on the show, we'd really like to sort of break down your journey to get to that point so we can really unpack some of the lessons and some of the things that you learn along the way that we can apply to our own personal journeys. So if we start with the saving, I guess that's where it all begins. You're not going to have the money to invest unless you have a really good savings strategy. So if we start there, can you talk to us about what your overall goal was and some of the rules or some of the things you implemented to really save what you needed to save to then invest?
Sure. So number one, I had absolutely no idea where my money was going. And so I took the step of creating just a simple spreadsheet to start tracking where my money was going. And so the money coming in from my paychecks and the money leaving via, paying the bills, paying the rent, all the things that you're spending money on. And so that after doing that for weeks and then months, and then what ultimately ended up being years, like you start building a picture of where your money is going. And I think just knowing that, or actually seeing it on paper, for me anyways, was really eye-opening, because a lot of us sort of just float through life, and money comes in and money leaves, and you have really no idea what you're doing with your money. And so I think just taking that initial step of writing down how much money was coming in and how much was leaving, I could then sort of target areas where I could potentially save more money.
And so how many streams of income did you have coming in? Was it just the one from your job, or did you have some side hustles going as well? I think one of the big things that people might say to this is that, I don't have enough money. I'm not earning enough to do a strategy like this. So did you just have the single income stream?
Right. Yeah, I did just have the single income stream. And, I guess I was kind of lucky in the fact that, I was working in corporate America, and there's you have a little bit more flexibility there, because you can switch jobs, you can look for raises, you can switch jobs to make more money. So I think you have a little bit more flexibility if you're willing to work on your career, versus someone that's sort of stuck in a position where there really isn't any advancement opportunities. So for me, I guess I realized that my career really was my biggest asset, and the asset that was the best bet for the income stream, versus someone else who might have to combine a full-time job with a side hustle or two or something like that.
So Chris, to get an idea of just how much and how hard you were saving over that time, as a percentage of your total income, how much were you saving?
So when I started out tracking my savings, I think I was saving around 10% of my pay. And once I started tracking it, and probably 5 years later, I got that up to close to 50%. And then that was just like maxed out. I couldn't really do anything after that. And so, a lot of people probably hear that going from 10% savings rate to 50. I mean, that's a big jump, but it also took me, 5+ years to do that. It's not like overnight you just end up saving 40% more money. It took a lot of discipline, and it took a lot of work.
And so if you look at how you made that step change from 10% to 50%, were there any major lifestyle decisions or any major changes you made in your life to enable you to save that much more?
I think that one of the first things I did was just start by cutting out something small. So it's kind of like this idea of changing a habit. And so a good way to change a habit is to start with something small, rather than trying to start with, 3 huge things. And so for me, it was something as simple as like, okay, instead of eating lunch out 5 days a week, well, I'm just going to eat lunch out 4 days a week, and then 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week, and then 1 day a week. And just sort of, I mean, you don't really, what happened is like my lifestyle inflated, right? And so it's very common when you're making more and more money to spend more and more money. And so someone who's making $50,000, it's really easy for them to spend $50,000. But that same person, when they're making $100,000, it's somehow very easy for them to spend $100,000, in that position. And that just kind of keeps going on and on and on. And that's called lifestyle inflation. And so I think that for me, it was just sort of like almost methodically going through all my different expenses, or the ways that I was spending money, and figuring out which ones, were not getting me towards my goal and that I really didn't care about. But then also making sure that I was spending in areas that, I got a lot of happiness or pleasure from, like travel. And so I think it was just finding a really good balance between spending and saving in order to sort of increase that savings rate.
So you spoke about goals there, Chris, and I think it'd be really interesting to know, how did you know how much to save, or did you firstly just start out by obviously taking control of your finances, and then you just went about investing as much as you could, or did you have 37 as the age in mind? How did you go about that process of goal setting?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think that I was just trying to save as much as possible, honestly, and I didn't really have any goals set around, saving X amount of dollars every month or anything like that. And on the other side of that, your other question, I think I was sort of projecting to maybe have enough money to be able to leave sometime in my 40s. And, as luck would have it, I did catch another lucky break in the fact that, I was investing lots of money throughout the great financial crisis. And that ended up being, a really good time to invest. And so I think that helped to accelerate my timeline even further.
You just touched on investing there. So if we go to the second part of the equation here, maybe if we start in broad strokes and then we'll get into specifics. Did you have a particular investing strategy or investing philosophy that you were pursuing?
So I started out at 22 with a broad market index fund. So I was investing in the S&P 500 at 22. And then around 2006, I got interested in individual stocks. And so at that point, I was investing some money into an index fund and some money into individual stocks, which is still what my portfolio consists of today. And so I don't know that I was balancing those in a smart way at that point, but that's really what my strategy was to continually put money into an index fund and also build a small stock portfolio.
So it's interesting there. You started in 2006 as a pretty, you started getting serious in 2006. So as a pretty young investor with, your savings in the market as the global financial crisis hit, how did you feel at that time, and how did you convince yourself to keep investing through it?
Yeah, so that was a super scary time. And I think, people have already forgotten like how scary the recession was in the financial crisis, because, me, like a lot of other people, a lot of other investors, my portfolio lost 50%, right? And so, when you see, I'd never gone through anything like that before. When I started investing in 2001, that was like the tail end of the .com bubble. So I didn't really see that in its entirety. So 2008 and that 50% drawdown was really scary. But I think the mindset that got me through it was the fact that I didn't need the money. Right. So I wasn't investing money that I know I needed next year to buy a car, or I know I needed 3 years from now for a down payment to purchase a house. It was money that I was investing for literally decades away. And so, yeah, it's really, really scary. And it sucks to see all that money just sort of evaporate out of your investment account. But if you can sort of take the long-term view about investing and know that over the long term, the market has always increased in value, then I think that that's a big win for the investor and their mindset.
It's probably a great experience to have early on in your investing journey, I guess, is to experience something like that and know that it obviously came good. I don't think many investors in the younger generation have experienced anything like the GFC. So in terms of your investing rhythm, Chris, how often were you investing, and how are you sort of avoiding the fee side of things? Like here in Australia, we obviously have to pay brokerage. I'm not sure what it's like over in the States, but one of the biggest sort of issues for us sort of starting out and wanting to do that dollar cost average on a regular basis is trying to find the most effective way to do it from a fee point of view. So what was your rhythm of investing?
So I was investing into that S&P 500 index fund via my employer. And so that was going into a retirement account automatically. And so, every paycheck, money just gets withdrawn from your paycheck and goes right into that investment. And so that rhythm is, every 2 weeks, money is just going in that dollar cost average type of model. And as far as my, stock portfolio, I set up almost the same way, where I would have a certain dollar amount transferred from my bank account over to my brokerage account. And then that money was sitting there and was ready to be invested, usually that month, depending on what I was looking to purchase. But, I also had a pretty good cadence with investing money regularly, in that brokerage account. And, fee wise, the fees on that S&P 500 index are, I don't know, maybe 3 basis points. So 0.03%, which is, almost nothing. And so that's a very good low fee. And then when you're buying individual stocks, the only fee you're going to pay is to buy and sell, and much more a buyer than a seller. And with my brokerage, I pay $5 per trade. And so, I'm not a big trader. More of a buy, like you mentioned. I'm much more long-term buy and hold. And so, $5 per purchase is pretty low.
So, Chris, as you went on your investing journey, you started getting better and better at saving more of your paycheck, and you were putting more and more in the market. Was there a tipping point where you started to realize, I might be, early retirement might be on the cards here?
Probably when I hit 7 figures, I thought that, this might be something that I can do.
And how far into the journey was that? Like a few years or a decade in, or what are we talking in terms of timelines?
Yeah, it really depends on when you start counting. So, I always count it when I was 22, because that is when I started investing. And so I hit that mark at 35. So what is that math wise? 13 years. So that's, that is a short, I guess you could see that as a short period of time or a long period of time. But I think for most people, that would be considered a short period of time. Yeah. And at that point, I thought that hitting that would be, super exciting and, like winning the lottery. But actually, it was really sort of a letdown. It was kind of like, the numbers just roll over and it's like, oh, cool. And then you just go about your day. Well, that's what I found anyways.
That's not a great takeaway. Becoming a millionaire by 35 was a bit of a letdown. We'll still aim for it.
I think it was just the fact that, it does take so long, right? And once you finally get there, it's kind of like meh, you're just kind of like, you've been doing it for so long or reaching for that goal for so long that it does become maybe less big than what you thought.
Yeah. So leading up to that sort of $1 million portfolio by the age of 35, were you investing really aggressively? What was sort of your portfolio allocation between stocks and ETFs, and then maybe more conservative or safer investments like cash or bonds or anything like that?
Sure. So I'm definitely a stock investor. I don't hold any bonds. I do hold cash, but that was never a large component of my overall portfolio. And I was putting probably, I don't know off the top of my head, but I was putting more money into individual stocks than I was into an index fund or an ETF. And I think that the reason for that was I just became a lot more comfortable with stocks than I was with index. I thought I could make more money with individual stocks than I could make, just buying the market and holding. And, buying the market and holding, buying an index fund and holding is a great way to invest. I mean, it's time tested, it's, low fee, and, it's a great way to build wealth over the long term. I just thought that buying, stocks that I could do a little bit better than the market.
So with your direct stock picking, are you a value-based investor, or do you look for growth stocks for capital growth, or are you looking for like high dividend yields? So I guess at this point, right now, you need some sort of return from those investments so you can live. So how do you go about stock picking? What's your strategy there?
So the portfolio that I built is maybe it's 12 or 13 stocks. And a lot of those I've held ever since I started picking stocks in 2006. And so I'm not really, value versus growth. I mean, those can almost be used somewhat interchangeably. But, I guess I have stocks that are considered value like, Apple, and I have stocks that are considered growth like, Netflix or something like Shopify. And so I think those two buckets are the buckets that I pick stocks in. And yeah, as far as dividends, like I don't really go out of my way to purchase stocks that pay a dividend. I would rather pick a stock that I think is going to appreciate in value. And I'm fine sort of trimming it in order to raise cash versus, sitting around and waiting for a dividend. And I know a lot of people, like picking or creating a dividend portfolio. And again, that's perfectly fine. We're all on our own investing journey. And, the nice part of that is that, you get your dividends every quarter and you don't have to do anything. But with trimming stocks, I mean, it takes a little bit more work because you have to figure out a way or a system for how you're going to do that to raise cash.
So, Chris, on that 12 or 13 positions in your portfolio, is that a sort of general rule of thumb that you try and keep to about that number? Or is that just there are only 12 or 13 stocks that you like at the moment?
I think that I enjoy having a much more concentrated portfolio. I mean, I think if you really study investing, you'll find that most recommendations you hear around creating a portfolio will be somewhere between owning 10 or 15 to 20 stocks. Because what I've found is that if you own 50 or 100 stocks, I mean, that's just like way too much to keep track of. And so the less that you own, the closer that you can keep track of all your stocks. And, I think you're just going to have better results because of that.
Where you mentioned reading there, where have you been sort of teaching yourself the basics of investing? And I know you studied finance, but there's a whole lot of resources and jargon and stuff out there. What have been some of the best resources that you've been using to sort of teach yourself along the way?
Probably, I mean, I've, used books, websites, and, just talking to other investors, talking to people like you that have an interest in it and that you can share ideas with. So I think if you cover those bases, then you're probably going to be in a good spot. And so as far as books go, I mean, there's 1,000 different investing books, and I've probably read a lot of them. But the other thing that I think has been really useful is actually reading outside of investing books. And so reading about human behavior and things like that are really key because, investing isn't just about money. It's more about avoiding emotional or psychological mistakes and really understanding how people operate, because that's what markets are made up of.
So, Chris, before this interview, we went out to our listeners and asked if they had any questions. And one that came in was around some sort of out of left field investments. So, we've touched on the major ones, a concentrated stock portfolio, index funds. Were there any sort of out of left field investment strategies or investable assets that you that you bought as part of this journey to retiring early?
No.
There you go.
I wish I had some super secret investment tip that I could share with people, with listeners. But I've just been buying good companies and holding them.
I love the fact that there isn't a super secret one, or that it's out of left field. Like the fact of the matter is, you were disciplined and sensible, and it's something that isn't unachievable for most people as long as they sort of follow a few simple rules. So I think it's good that it's accessible.
Yeah.
Right.
So Chris, we're obviously in our late 20s, so time is on our side when it comes to investing. However, some of our listeners are also a bit later on in life and starting out their investing journey as well. So one of the questions that has come through is from Pabs, and he wants to know how possible it is to achieve pre-retirement financial independence when starting at an older age. Is the main vehicle for financial independence time, or is it more of the saving and investing technique, or is it both?
I mean, I think you'll find that it is time, because that's the key to all this, especially investing in the markets, is time in the market. And so that's just a cold fact. And if you're starting later, that's fine. I think the problem, and I hear this all the time from emailers telling me that they're 50 and they're asking, is it too late, and things of that nature. And the thing that I always say to them is, no, it's like, you should start today. Like, don't keep putting it off, another week, another month, another year, because in a year you're going to be in the same spot you are today, asking, is it too late to start at 51, and on and on and on. So, it's better to just like start today and work on that journey, rather than, putting it off for another year or 2 or 3 or 10.
So Chris, on that theme of starting today, another listener question that we got, might be putting you on the spot a bit, so feel free to answer in general terms if you want. But a listener wanted to know where you would invest $100K today. Considering current market conditions, would you be looking, domestically in the States? Would you be looking overseas? Is there any particular asset classes that you like or don't like? $100K, where would you be looking?
Yeah, I'd probably be looking over my own portfolio and seeing where I would want to add the money. And that's the whole point here, is that everyone is going to build their own investment portfolio, hopefully, and manage it. And, you're going to become really attuned to your investments, and over time realize where your dollars coming in, where this new cash coming in, where that is going to be best invested. And so the other little bit of advice that I'd offer is that that's also a big chunk of change. And so definitely a fan of not just sort of forcing $100,000 into the market, in one day. I'm a fan of, taking the time to add it to the market over a period of time, dollar cost averaging. So, breaking that down into chunks of 10K or even 5K and investing over, a longer period of time.
So now that you've retired, Chris, your strategy, simply put, I guess, is earn, save, and invest. Now that you have, I guess, lost that main source of income, how has your strategy changed post-retirement now? How are you still contributing to your portfolio if you're needing to trim to live, I guess? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, it's really weird, actually, because what happens is, you build this sum of money, and then all of a sudden you're sort of forced to start taking it out. And that's a really big mind shift. And I think that, a lot of retirees, in their 60s find the same thing, where, they spent essentially a working lifetime saving up saving up this huge nest egg. And all of a sudden, they have to flip a switch in their brain and start spending that money. And so I found that a lot of people have that problem sort of making that switch. And, I was no different, but, when push comes to shove, you realize that, essentially you're going to have to start, trimming your portfolio or, spending your dividends in order to live. And so it's almost, I almost view it as a positive because, that's what my goal was. That's what my dream was to do that. And so I think that, it just took a while, a year or 2 years to actually wrap my head around that and become comfortable with it. And, once I've done that, now I'm much more comfortable doing it. And that's really like doing anything new for the first time. You just have to do it. And then you gain experience. And then it becomes, just something that you do.
And so is it going to be a case of retire at 37, back to work at 60?
Yeah, I don't think so. I hope not.
What would happen if we went through another GFC-like event, though? I
think that, my portfolio has also grown over the past 3 years by quite a bit. And so, I've built up almost this extra big cushion on top. And so now I'm really comfortable with where I'm at. And so if we did go through any other recession or correction or you name it, I think that, I wouldn't sweat it. It'd be fine.
So Chris, as I said before, it gives people a lot of hope, I think, to see you manage to retire at 37, not by doing anything super complex, but just by, really taking control of the income that you're earning, making sure that you're saving as much of it as possible and making long-term sensible investments. For people who are at home, who are, opening up Excel and starting to build the spreadsheet, is there anything else that you think was really important for you on that journey that we haven't covered off on?
Maybe two things. Number one, discipline, right? Because I think that it does take a certain amount of discipline to reach any of your goals, whether it's writing a book or whether it's, becoming a public speaker or whatever it is, right? It's about, putting in the work and doing it and becoming disciplined around your goals. And so I think that would, it's definitely a key for what I did. And, for anyone trying to do anything, that's, I think, a huge key. And number two, I'd say that, it's with any big goal, like it has to really be, almost become something like you eat and breathe, right? It's just something that has to sort of, become part of you because, it's going to take a long time to reach any big goal. It's going to be, complicated. There's going to be ups and downs. And if you just sort of give up, when the tough times come, then, you're not going to get there. And so it just becomes something that you have to really believe in and to really want and to be able to see that through to the end.
Yeah, interesting. So a good couple of, personal characteristics, but from an investing standpoint, if I was to, I've got my Excel, I've developed a good savings habit. What do you think are some of the most basic, but really important investing concepts that people need to understand if they're to, adopt this sort of strategy?
Again, I think it's really about understanding yourself because, like you mentioned, when the next crisis rolls around and somebody sees their investments fall by 40 or 50%, like that does get really scary. And so I think that, you really need to understand, your own behavior and how you're going to react to something like that. And unfortunately, to actually go through that and to experience it and to see that in the long run, that's actually, those times are actually an opportunity. And so I think it's just, you can build the spreadsheets, you can invest the money, but it's going to be about, really controlling your own behavior. That is going to be the key to investment success.
So Chris, in Australia, we have a superannuation system. I think in America, the equivalent would be a 401k, like a retirement savings account. How did you view that in the context of your strategy? because in Australia, at the very least, you can't access your superannuation until you're 65.
Yeah,
Looking at Bryce, I'm not 100% sure of the age.
I'm not 65.
But for someone, who's looking to retire at 37 or, 40, whatever it is, how do you think these retirement accounts should figure into their thinking around investing?
Yeah, there's different ways that you can approach that. So maybe just sharing what I did would help. So here in the US, I basically structured it where I ended up with about 25% of invested money in a retirement account that's not accessible until 60 or so. And then I ended up with the remainder, 75%, in what's called a taxable brokerage account. And so that money is accessible to you whenever now or in the whenever in the future. And so that's basically how I structured my invested money to be able to access that before traditional retirement age.
So I guess the big question is, Chris, you are now retired. So what are you doing with your time? Like, are you playing lawn bowls, or how do you get? I mean, it's a pretty luxurious position to be in, and something that we all certainly strive for. But is it all that is meant to crack up to be, or what's it like?
I mean, for me, it's great because I get to, it was really about the time, right? I wanted my time back because it seemed like when I was at work, I was just thinking about all the other things I'd rather be doing, right? And so now that I have my time back, I've been spending it writing. I have a website where I write articles and put out, research. And I've been, reading stacks and stacks of books. I've been, paying much closer attention to my investments. I've been, I picked up meditation, and I spent a lot more time, on my health, just eating healthier, eating super clean, working out, doing yoga, riding my bike, so there's just a lot more free time to be able to take care of yourself, mentally, physically, emotionally, and even spiritually too, which was an area of my life that was always neglected.
And I guess the big question is, is this a strategy that anyone can do? It's, as you said, you started out university with not a lot of money, and not everyone gets to be in a position where they have a really well-paying job and can put a lot of their income into savings. What would be your piece of advice to those people that probably think they might be in a position where this strategy really wouldn't suit their circumstance?
I mean, that's just, unfortunately, that is the reality for some people. And I think I was lucky in that, I found a high paying career, and, I also really liked investing, and I really lucked out in a couple different areas there. But I think that, for people in maybe a different scenario, there's still things that they can do. I mean, unless it's like a single mom taking care of two kids that is working a minimum wage job, that's tough, that's impossible. But for most other people, there's usually some give in their standard of living, right? And so if they look at their life and how they're spending their money, like there's probably areas where they can cut back. It's just that they don't want to, and that's perfectly fine. And everyone can live however they want to live, but there's probably opportunities to be able to save and invest for the long term.
So, Chris, thanks for joining us, and thanks for giving us your time. We always end our interviews with a final 3 questions. But before we get into that, you mentioned you had a website. If people want to follow you or find out more about you, is there a particular, the website, or is there a particular social media that you post on?
Yeah, just my website, which is my name, chrisreining.com.
Perfect. We'll include a link to that in the show notes as well, if people want to find it that way as well. So, Chris, the final 3 questions that we end every interview with. The first one: do you have any must-read books, investing or otherwise?
So I read a lot, and I don't know if I have one specific book, but I'll give you one that I read just a few months ago that I thought was really good, and that was Sapiens by Yuval Harari. And it does relate to investing, in that, investing is really about human behavior. And that book covers, it covers humankind and from day one. And I think it's a really good top level overview of humans. And I think if you understand humans, then you'll understand investing.
Yeah, Sapiens is my must-read book as well. So yeah, it's a cracker. If people haven't read it, they definitely should. Second question: what's your go-to source for investing information?
Oh boy, I probably read The Motley Fool and Seeking Alpha, mostly for fun, but also to get updates on, company news and that sort of thing. But I'm one of those guys who will like dig into a company's, annual and quarterly reports. So super, super boring for 99% of people, but that is probably my go-to source.
Nice one. And last question, if you look back to, your 20-year-old self when you were just starting your investing and saving journey, what advice would you give your younger self?
I'd probably tell my younger self to take their career more seriously. So that is one area that I sort of slipped up on for many, many years, was just not taking my biggest asset, my career, very seriously. And it took me until my late 20s or even early 30s to sort of get that into gear. So that's what I would tell the 20-year-old self.
So usually we would wrap it up there, Chris, but I actually do have one more question that I think might open a whole can of worms. But anyway, I think it's important we ask, how did you know what the right amount of money was in your investing account to actually retire? Like if I was to set a goal and say I want to retire rather than by a particular age, what would the steps be that I go through to figure out what do I actually need in my investing fund to do so?
So that really goes back to your spreadsheet, because you need to know how much you're spending per year. And once you know how much you're spending per year, let's say it's $40,000 for the sake of math. So you can take that and multiply it by 25 times. So you need 25 times your annual spending. And so if you multiply 25 by 40,000, you'll get 1 million. And so that is based on some well-known research by William Bengen, and also some other researchers, the Trinity study, etc., that you can Google if you're interested in. But it's really based on the 4% withdrawal rate rule.
25 times, wow, seems a lot, but I guess it's all dependent on your current spending habits to then determine what that 25 times is.
Yeah. Right. So you'll hear sometimes people say you need 10 million or 20 million to retire. But what they're really saying is that you have a super expensive lifestyle. So it really does come down to how much you spend, because that determines how much you need.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll leave it there, Chris. I think there was some really good insight there and quite a inspiring conversation. It's something that Alec and I have been talking about for a while, and both of us, have that goal of certainly using the vehicle of investing to remove the need to rely so much on the career paycheck later in life. And as you have done, dedicate more time to doing the things that we would like to be doing rather than have to be doing. So really good to speak to someone who's walks the walk. And yeah, really appreciate you coming on the show, Chris. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was super fun.
Equity Mates and the people appearing in this program may have positions in the companies mentioned. This is general advice only. Please speak to a financial professional to understand how it may pertain to your individual situation.
Equity Mates!
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.